Hello and welcome to Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook. For this episode of Harmonious World, I'm delighted to be joined by composer Danae Xanthe Vlasse. Now, I interviewed Danae back in July 2022, almost exactly 2 years ago, when she had just won a Grammy for Mythologies. She's now released Mythologies II. I was fortunate enough to be present in the studio at Abbey Road in London when some of this was recorded. And it features the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra and pianist Robert Thies and the fantastic sopranos Sangeeta Kaur and Hila Plitman, with tenor Omar Najmi. What you're listening to now is Cassiopeia's Lament. But I hope you enjoy listening to my conversation with Danae. I'm really looking forward to this one. Hello. Oh, there you are.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, I'm really good, thank you. It's lovely to see you.
Oh, it's been so long and yet it's been so busy. It went past so quickly.
I know. It's 6 months since that recording in Abbey Road.
Yes, it has. How have you been?
Oh, I'm very, very well, thank you. And Harmonious World is it's flying. People are listening to it all around the world. It's incredible.
Can you attribute that to anything in particular?
Um, no, I don't know. I think it's persistence. And I think it's having, a roster of guests, and I'm getting quite a lot of kind of repeat guests and things, and it feels like it's found its place, and
Oh,
and
really?
now more and more people are sharing it with, which is lovely.
That is marvelous. And when did you first launch this podcast?
4 years ago. I'm just started my
In
fifth
the
year now.
pandemic.
Yeah, it was a pandemic project.
Well, congratulations for making that into something extraordinary.
Thank you. And and thank you for inviting me and Richard to experience the recording of this absolutely fabulous album at Abbey Road.
I was thrilled to have you participate because I'm actually quite curious about that experience from your perspective because I was so deep in it.
Oh,
I
I
think
know.
I will cherish, and I'd love to ask you about this even during the interview. I would cherish your perspective.
It was one of those really, really deeply moving experiences. I loved your music. I loved Mythologies when I first heard it in 2022. And obviously you won the Grammy for that. And there is something so, I don't even know what the word is, existential, or it feels like it's the only way to listen to it is by allowing it to wash over you and completely absorb you in it or something. I don't know. It's just amazing.
Hmm.
And, and
Wow.
yeah, and so to have experienced that, to have listened to the original, the first album, and then to hear the recording at Abbey Road was just amazing.
Had you ever been there before?
Many, many, many years ago, but not since they've done it all up, because they've changed some of the layout. So the actual, the studios are still in the same place and everything, but some of it they've changed and things. So the layout was slightly different, but yeah, that was a great experience though.
Yes. It was unforgettable for me as well.
It felt like it was there was a spiritual sharing of this music. Is that how it felt for you?
I'm so glad you experienced that. Yeah, that was entirely the intent, both from a creative perspective when the music was written, but of course from a production perspective and how we hoped that the experience would unfold for everyone involved, such that everyone could feel moved by it and hopefully that it would be both positive and transformational.
It certainly was for me. And I also, so I saw obviously Michael Shapiro and Jeff at Magian. And
Yes.
so that was amazing. So he then came on my podcast about 2 or 3 weeks later. It's just opened emotional and intellectual doors, I think, in some way.
Oh, good. Gosh, tell me more about that.
Well, it felt like that, honestly, it felt like a tipping point. We were talking earlier about the fact that Harmonious World's been going for 4 years, coming into its fifth year, and it's changing. It's definitely ramped up a gear in the last 6, 7 months. And I think that's partly something has given me more confidence to believe that this is something of value. And I think there was something about going to Abbey Road for that. I went to Michael Shapiro's recording of his flute concerto at what used to be Angel Studios. It's the new Abbey Road in Islington, and I went there and sat in the control room for that, and it feels like I'm part of something now. Whereas before, actually, that's exactly what it is. So before it felt like I was on the outside looking in, but now it feels like I'm part of something.
Fantastic. Wow. Yeah, that speaks as much to the openness of the artist as it does to your sense of confidence and taking on a real engaged role
Yeah,
on a level where maybe you were still finding your place prior, and that's really beautiful. Wow, you've really found
yeah.
your calling then.
Really, absolutely. It's incredible. And the music that you have written is simply stunning. And of course it's based on the Greek myths. So these are stories that go back centuries that we all kind of know a little bit, but you seem to shed a different light on those stories. How did that happen?
Oh, I think the need for meaning in storytelling is long-standing, and every culture imbues a sense of their own ideals and values in every story that's told. So, particularly when we retell stories, we keep the broad strokes of plot, but I think it's normal to come to each character with a more nuanced perspective that expresses the new ideals of the day. So I don't think that this was particularly original. It was intentional on my part. I spent a lot of time researching the stories and making decisions about which ones I would tell, how I would tell them, and why I would tell them, because I wanted to make sure that if I embarked upon what would be years of work and an all consuming creative effort, that I would be so invested in the characters because I felt that I could relate to them. And that's part of how these stories take on greater depth and greater meaning because we live with these characters for years. And as the music gets written, in my case, it's a very slow process to write all these pieces. It took me a year and a half of writing time, almost 2 years, if I really consider. Of course, there are gaps in the work because, as you know, I released my prior album, Mythologies, in 2021. And then there was a huge promotional campaign for that, and we won a Grammy, and there were concerts, and there was a lot of parallel work as I was already writing Mythologies II. But the characters are meaningful to me, and the stories have depth for me. I only hope that that conveys extra worth to a listener. And I don't relate to one dimensional characters, so I made sure that the stories I told came with multi layered people, or in some cases beings, because I tell the story of Medusa, and she's not human the whole time. So it really was a question of trying to connect with her humanity even when she's in her Gorgon form. And she's a great parallel for human experience, and she's a great parallel for what is explored and what was explored in the prior album, which was the story of Odysseus and the concept of the hero's journey. So, in simple terms, for those who don't know the idea of the hero's journey, it's a basic broad storytelling format that's still very common in film and even print storytelling today, in which there's a beginning in a sense of the protagonist having a relatively normal or uneventful life with a great deal of unfulfilled potential. The next stage involves a radical challenge that causes transformation and growth in the character. And finally, in the end, there's a sense of triumph, or at the very least, a state of peace after struggle. And we experience that very clearly in Homer's Odyssey. And in this case, I really went there with my first album. I wrap it up in this one, in that the last track of this Mythologies II album is called Dreams of Ithaca. And it's the part of the story in which I bring Odysseus home. But I explore the hero's journey in another way. I also look at how that storytelling is applied in the story of Medusa. And this is how we open the Mythologies II album. Medusa's story is also defined by the three broad stages of those traits of storytelling. And so her formula starts where she begins as a human, in a human form, serving Athena in a fairly limited capacity. Then she experiences a massive transformation. She literally becomes something non-human. She becomes the Gorgon creature, which is, of course, so infamous. She experiences great suffering. And finally, in the end of the story, she is returned to Athena, and she is brought home to Mount Olympus, where she is literally molded into Athena's armor, and she's able to serve her goddess in that form as well. So it's a tale which ultimately explains how transformation and even death is a means of reaching a desired destination. And we see homecoming themes, therefore, equally in Medusa, where she returns to Mount Olympus to serve her goddess, and equally in the story of King Odysseus as he returns to his island of Ithaca at the end of the Odyssey. So I bookend the album with these ideas of the hero's journey.
Yeah. And there is something primeval, isn't there, about those stories about a character going on a journey.
Mm-hmm.
And
Truly.
yeah, and you think how many modern films and modern television shows and that sort of thing take us on that journey with a character. And obviously in this you've got different, several different characters, and they have that, there's a sense of familiarity because most of us have heard some of the Greek myths in various forms, since childhood, but you explore those in such depth.
Hmm. Wow, thank you. Well, yeah, I really think that the superheroes, as you just said, is the superheroes that we celebrate in films. They are really an extension of the heroes that history has idolized. And in their characters, these stories are really more than a product of imagination. They're a clear cultural compass for what we value in society. And so those heroes are an idealization of human potential. They represent triumph in the face of overwhelming odds. And that is literally the hope that drives mankind. I mean, this is why we are willing to endure great struggle. And as you say about these characters, you know, they're complex. I really wanted to look at how we have these timeless archetypes that are the notion of what it means to be a warrior, or to be a hero, or to be a victim, or to transgress. These are all concepts that have been built into storytelling forever. And I really enjoyed the duality of most of the characters that I represent in this music. So Medusa, you can experience her as an innocent victim, but you can also see her as a ruthless aggressor out to turn things to stone. And then, of course, you can negotiate within yourself whether that is an act of fear or an act of aggression. But she's also portrayed in another way because she represents renewal. And the literal transformation of her body is a metaphor for the transformation of the human who experiences struggle. The fact that she's crowned and identified in snake form is really recalling the most ancient concepts of how the snake shedding its skin represents renewal. In the stories, we also see how, in the way that I tell the story of Odysseus, he's completely physically defeated, emotionally drained. So how does a man, after 20 years of struggle, of extreme physical and emotional strife, continue to persevere? And so we see the dichotomy of that weakness and the eventual strength of his faith. The sopranos in this piece, Dreams of Ithaca, which ends the album, the sopranos represent hope and purpose. They're literally the elements that come from within him that guide him, his inner voice of hope and purpose. And those are the archetypes of what it takes to be wise, to be a sage ruler, to have dominion not just over a physical land, but over your internal being. So we explore that and those dichotomies and those archetypes in the hero Odysseus. And then we have other characters in this album. We see Perseus. He's very present. He is obviously the warrior who went after Medusa. So yes, he's the archetype of the warrior, but he's also represented in a very important way that I wanted to emphasize. And this is very 21st century, but I think it's important to represent the stories that we tell in a way that honors what our belief systems wish to celebrate. So I represent Perseus not just as externally strong, externally courageous, but I want to show his inner strength. And after he kills Medusa, we hear his material come back, his musical material return in a very tender, compassionate way, because I wanted to show his strength as a compassionate caregiver. And he literally respects the being he just killed by singing respectfully to her as she's dying. And when we see him in the story of Andromeda, which takes the entire middle of the album, 6 tracks through the center of the album, 6 parts of this story of Andromeda, Perseus is again the savior, but I really represent him in terms of his compassion again. He is very sensitive to Andromeda's experience, and he's very well represented as a compassionate lover, savior being. The internal strengths that I wanted to represent, not just the fact that he slays Medusa and conquers this massive monster who's going to kill Andromeda. The other characters are female characters that are also of incredible depth of value and that have a lot to be celebrated. we see Queen Cassiopeia, Andromeda's mother, who who boasted of Andromeda's beauty. And I think that her tale is one of caution about the nature of words and how destructive they can be when taken out of context. So when she boasts about her daughter's beauty, I think it's very natural for a mother to feel great admiration for her offspring. And in this case, the fact that she boasted about her beauty could have been vastly misinterpreted and dramatically, let's say, punished in a way that I think was an overreaction on the part of the gods. So for Queen Cassiopeia to suffer the death of her daughter in order to atone for her hubris, I think it's a very dramatic tale of excess. And we see this queen saying farewell to her daughter in this heartbroken character, and she acknowledges that she's transgressed and that she must pay this price, but she's also hopeful, and there's this sense that she will sustain the value of her daughter's existence by celebrating her with every breath she has left to take. The dichotomy that we experience when we see Princess Andromeda, who's going towards her death willingly, is that she's very stoic and she's willing to enact this self-sacrifice in order to placate the wrath of the gods against her land and her people and her mother. But she's terrified, and so we experience this incredible superhuman strength of stoicism and self-sacrifice that she's willing to offer, but we also feel her humanity and her terror. So these are characters that I wanted to portray in sort of a depth of expression that meant a lot to me and gave me a lot of material for the music to have a very expressive potential.
Yeah. And it just, the stories, it's almost as if the music, the sort of individual orchestral instruments and certainly the voices, they do more than just tell the story. They allow you to experience the story and experience the emotions of the characters as well, as you've just described.
Thank you so much for saying that. It's such astute listening because, yes, without meaning to take anything away from the singers, they're extraordinary. However, there are really very few actual lyrics in these stories.
Right.
Huge portions of the music, huge elements of the story unfold without lyrics. So the vocalists are given a unique challenge. In the case of Medusa, she never speaks a word. She's a vocalization only. And in the case of the Gorgon version of Medusa, represented by the incredible soprano Hila Plitman, there's this, what I call snake voice. It's a very special kind of sonic use of the voice. And she's making a very guttural sound. She's using her voice in ways that are sort of excessive and supposed to be very visceral for the listener. And that's contrasted with the priestess Medusa, represented by my beautiful, also beautiful friend, soprano Sangeeta Kaur, who embodies the priestess in the human form. And she sings in this very ethereal sort of a form of sonic vocal quality that's designed to sound very ethereal and distant. And we get the very we get this very visceral experience of the character in her past and in her present, two very different personas that even overlap in one place in the piece, where we hear the Gorgon Medusa, but we also hear the priestess as her memory in a very sort of removed, faint background effect. And all of that is intentional because it's trying to bring the listener into the character in the complete absence of text. And the music is designed to tell the story regardless. The words are not actually propelling the action. if there are words, they're an expression of the character's internal experience, but they're not advancing the plot. They're like moments of a scene, but they're not actually telling the whole story. So thank you for hearing that, because it's true that the music does a lot of work that isn't dependent upon the lyrics.
Yeah, absolutely. And the RPO, the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, were outstanding, weren't they? I mean, their
Oh,
performance in the
yes.
studio is just incredible.
Yes, yes, absolutely incredible musicians, and so many were incredibly kind to come tell me what the music meant to them. I didn't realize to what extent people really connected with these stories. In some cases, they were connecting with their children through these stories. I had the concertmaster come up to me and tell me that his young son, who's 8 or 9 years old, had seen him looking at the score the night before recording and thought, yeah, my dad is so cool because he's playing this music on these awesome stories. And it turns out this young boy knew the stories better than his father. So they had this really beautiful bonding experience in which the son explained the whole setting of the scene to his father, who would then be interpreting it musically the next day.
Wow, that's amazing. And there was a real connection, I think, between the members of the orchestra, and Michael as the conductor and Robert as the pianist. And then I found it interesting that Sangeeta and Hila were in separate rooms, and because they were sort of doing guide vocals, weren't they, at that point? Because you redid them, is that right?
No, no, they actually recorded everything in Abbey
Oh,
Road.
wow.
And that
Oh, I
was
didn't.
very intentional. That's literally why there are vocal booths in the space. Now, they're
Right.
not complete isolation. We can still hear the orchestra in the booths, and in quieter places in the live room, they could hear the vocalists. But it gives a sense of control for the engineers. It's purely for the engineers to be able to have more ability
Ah,
to control the levels. And as you can imagine, with vocals and a full orchestra, there are balance issues that need to be resolved. And so this allowed us to make sure that we would ensure a really good recording with true control over placement.
yeah, which it absolutely is. That's really amazing, because when I heard the album itself, as opposed to being in the studio, I thought that you had gone and re-recorded the vocals, because when you're in the control room, because I didn't have headphones on or anything, I could hear it, but I couldn't hear the balance in the same way. And so that all of that was done in the mixing and the mastering, I suppose. And
No, let me explain. What you were
okay,
hearing
yeah,
in the
go on.
control room was actually something else. So you're correct that obviously we isolated the vocals to some degree in order to be able to control the mix. But what you were hearing is not a representation of what was recorded, because what we were listening to in the control room, what you were hearing, is what the producers and the engineers, were monitoring depending on our roles. And the majority of the people in the control room needed to hear what you were hearing. However, you will have noticed there were producers wearing headphones, and there
Yeah.
was at least one engineer wearing headphones. They were monitoring vocals. So they needed to hear
Oh,
vocals as primary, and they were feeding the vocal sound much more into their headsets than we were hearing in the live room. I mean, sorry, in our control room. And likewise, Michael on the podium was able to, and in fact, all the players in the live room were able to put on their headsets and hear a different mix according to what they needed, more or less vocals, or, it was entirely a situation in which they were monitoring what they needed according to their roles.
wow. I had no idea. I had no idea that that's how it worked. That's why it's so different what I could hear in the studio compared to what I can hear on the album, because in the album you've got the whole thing.
That's right.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, that's amazing. Thank you for explaining that. That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to direct my listeners to the first episode we recorded, which was obviously 2 years ago, for a bit more about your background and things. So can you tell me now about what is next for you? Because this is a huge achievement. Oh, and by the way, I have to say the imagery, the photography for this album is just incredible.
For that, I have two men to thank. That's the artist Greg Spalenka and the digital designer Jeff Byrne. They did outdo themselves. They both worked on the previous album and they came in on this one with so much inspiration and dedication, as did everyone on our team. This second album was truly an immense reach for all of us, and I felt as though the nature of the challenge allowed everyone to really show what they're capable of. And I was really blessed for how much talent was given to me on this project.
Yes. Yeah,
I
and it
should bring
does.
another.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, an incredible discovery for me on this project was another name I've not yet mentioned, which is our tenor Omar Najmi,
Yeah.
and he was, oh gosh, he was, I melt every time he opens his mouth. I completely melt. He was able to bring in as much commitment to the characters as the Sopranos gave theirs, and yet he didn't have the history of all the work and the sisterhood that I've built up with the Sopranos, who have, this is, in some cases, this is our third or fourth project together with these Sopranos. Omar is completely new to me, and I'm eager to keep working with him because he was so professional, came in so prepared, and delivered with such incredible mastery.
Yeah, I mean his voice is just amazing.
The other element that came from the last album was, as you mentioned, the pianist, and that's Robert Thies. And he was positioned in the center of the orchestra. The piano was facing the podium, and the orchestra fanned out around him. And it was such a beautiful symbiotic relationship between the piano and the orchestra all blending together like that. They could all really hear each other. That's part of the reason that they were positioned in that way. And I could see the incredible camaraderie that they experienced and deep mutual respect for one another. That was a really a gift to see that unfolding.
Yeah, I mean so much quality in every aspect of this, from your compositions through to the final product, which is, I mean, it's just an amazing album, really is.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, so back to my sort of original question, which is what is next? How do you follow that?
I have been asking myself the same thing.
I'm
I don't
sure.
have an answer for you. I have a million ideas, and as you know, the process of promoting an album is quite time consuming and truly, in my case, it's often felt overwhelming. There's so much that I feel I want to achieve, and so I don't know how to answer that. I can only tell you I will give my all to everything I undertake, and I hope to put out many more extraordinary projects that feel like an accomplishment akin to this one.
Right. Well,
Of
that's good.
course.
I'm looking forward to hearing some more, something, on a different topic or something. It sounds like there's a sort of a whole world out there, and you could go in any direction.
Yes, of course, the way you phrased the question gave me the thought you had something in mind. What were
Oh,
you imagining?
no, no. I mean, I really don't know, but it feels like there are stories that need you to tell them in the same way that you've done with these Greek mythologies. And obviously there's a that you're close to those because of your own background, your own, your personal life. But that,
That's right. I'm half Greek. Yeah.
yes, yes, but it feels like there's something else where there's some more stories that will need telling in your own
I
inimitable
I
way.
intend Yes, I intend many more stories. I really connect with the concept of storytelling in music.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. Well, I look forward to whatever comes next.
Well, thank you so much. I look forward to sharing what comes next. In the short term, I'm focused on the promotion process. I'm eager for concerts and many, many performances of this music that means so much to me.
Yeah. Have you got concerts, performances planned with these soloists?
Oh, that will come. Yes, yes, that will come.
Right.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, I will direct people to your website so that they can hear news about where they can see and hear this music performed live, perhaps. So, yeah,
Yes, and under the contact page of my website, people can contact me and sign up to be on the mailing list for updates of releases and performances.
fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me on Harmonious World. I'm really grateful, Danae.
Thank you very, very much, Hilary. I'm touched to have had this second opportunity to speak with you.
That was a wonderful experience. I love talking to Danae. She's such a special person, and her composition is just amazing. And her vision for this album, Mythologies II, is just extraordinary. And I can't wait to see what she comes up with next. So what you're listening to now is Dreams of Ithaca, which she talked about, which is Odysseus sailing home. I hope you enjoyed listening to that immensely gratifying conversation with Danae Xanthe Vlasse. I hope you have an excellent week and keep sharing what you're good at. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.